Thank you. Wow.
Welcome.
There's much more to come. It's just that I wasn't set up to do my, pardon the expression, Nazi bell experiment, but it is coming. I'm almost complete.
Not the Nazi, just the bell.
Derek Locking. Just
Yeah,
Derek
well,
Locking.
I say that
You
for
should show
reference.
that thing, man, because a lot of people are on Jeremy's channel today that haven't seen what you managed to pick up. That thing is freaking awesome, and it's
I can
just
show
about
the bell.
It's unfortunately it does. It's had some bad pejoratives from the History Channel and Ancient Aliens and all that stuff. But there's also the Kecksburg Bell, which I think of in Pennsylvania, which is very interesting in 1960 whatever, 61 or something. There's a number of bells, and it's interesting how many. Yeah, the South American bells exactly. But we have a new. Oh wow, there that's
a literal Derek Locking.
There we go.
Voidisyingyang, we're going to give you a real introduction in a second.
and then the guts are being worked on as we speak. They're actually on parts of it's on the other table, the other parts in the other room that I was testing prior today. So
in the future, we're all going to have guitars that are super thick and have this inside of them. It's going to be great.
It's going to be a lot of fun in the future. So that's it. That's me. Thank you for listening.
Incredible. That's incredible.
Thank you so much,
Gerald. Guys, and we're also just really, we should also explain to people where you can get some more of Gerald's material. I'm going to pull that up for a second too.
And I'm also posting it in the live chat for everyone. This
right.
is channel WPG.
There it is. WPGN Lighten for Truth 2. And make sure you're subscribed because he had to remake his channel and he's putting some amazing stuff up. So we want to give him a pump up and make sure that you guys are aware of his next videos as they come out. He just put out something yesterday. And you gotta expect more stuff to come. But also, Voidisyingyang, welcome. How are you doing?
Oh, we can't hear you. You're
hyper muted. Yeah. Whenever you're muted, though, the best thing to do immediately is just imagine you're in a box, and then just try to imagine that the walls are the same size on both. Because you don't want to have the bent arm. You have to make sure it's like,
you just mind your way out of the situation.
And then you want to have you have to climb over the thing. And you're just like.
Well, Andreas, you do the climb on the wall.
Or you just might have to go down the basement.
I'm not saying I'm a classically trained mime or anything. But
no.
I could
that'd be crazy.
Later.
Wait, is he jumped? Look at him back. Look at him back. He's reloading. He's reloading. Yeah, it's true.
There we go.
Oh, Voidisyingyang, what's up?
We gotta go in settings and change out his microphone and figure out what.
Yeah, give yourself a second. Go into the settings. Go to your settings, and then in settings, we can't hear you. But you got to go to settings. This is always fun. If you go to settings and you go to audio, and you get audio, then you can click input mic, and you change mic to what it is that you are using.
I actually had to take out my Bluetooth, even though it was set on my iPad mic. And after
can you hear that?
Bluetooth and cut it.
There he is.
Yes, we can hear.
That. All right. I spent a few nights in a hut out in the woods with no technology at all. So
it's always the way to start a show.
I have a good excuse.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I was literally
any good adventure should begin, and
yeah, I was lucky to escape. I had to escape back to civilization. So, speaking of bells, that's a good segue to the ancient Chinese tuning bells. If we think of sound in traditional Chinese culture, am I loud enough, or
yeah, we can.
Good.
I can.
Okay, because
I'll adjust as time goes on.
All right. So the thing is that can I talk softer? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So, all right. Basically, the idea of sound in China was closer to what they called qi, as energy. So the sound would transduce, and the whole idea.
Oh no.
We think of sound as an external measurement, right? And it turns out that Western science actually comes from music theory. Hey, there you go. Thank you. So we kind of have to relearn Western science because we don't realize it originated from music theory, and so that's why China is kind of a good way to look at a different way. For example, they didn't have their octaves lining up in the traditional music scale, and so instead, what they had was what is actually the natural frequencies, which would be an infinite spiral of what they called yin and yang. And it turns out the perfect fifth is yang, and then the perfect fourth is yin. But what's not recognized in the Western scale is that the perfect fifth as a undertone, which would be like, if okay, I don't want to get too abstract here, but the perfect fifth as an undertone is what becomes the perfect fourth as an overtone. And so that right there, when you learn music theory, people do not learn that basic truth, and that's essentially it. So, there's a guy. There's only one scientist who explains this secret, and he has a Fields Medal in math, which is harder to get than the Nobel Prize. It's called. His name is Alon Kans, and he calls it 2-3 infinity. So all you have, it's a very simple concept, but essentially what it means is that the future and the past are overlapping as a non-locality, and it's almost like too simple of an idea to accept in reality. But if you if you look at, is Jeremiah here, because he was asking me.
Oh yeah. That's specifically
Okay.
what I want to talk about was non-locality and
Okay, great.
and how you're
Okay.
using it and defined by it.
Well, I've been discussing. Normally, I correspond with professors, and I like to, I send them, I read their stuff, and they usually answer because that's what they're paid to do, So, um, okay, basically, um, it turns out, okay, how Alon Khan, he has a great lecture called "Music of Shapes," and he has several versions of it on YouTube, and like I said, he's the only scientist who's figured out this secret of music. And so that's why I want to keep on repeating his name. It's Lain, or I'm sorry, Alain is his first name. And then Connes is his last name. And so if you type in his name and then music of shapes, you'll get his lecture. And the best example,
Sorry, spell his name again.
it's Alain for Alon, and then Connes is his last name. And then type music of shapes is the name of the lecture. And yeah, and so he has several versions of that lecture on YouTube, but the best one is in French because that's his native language, right? And then there's a translator. Yeah, that's the one in French. Okay, at any rate, now if you watch this, it's hard to understand the music directly because he's talking about non-commutative geometry, which is why you got the Fields Medal. Non-commutative geometry happens to be a unified field theory, so it's his argument to unify relativity in quantum physics. But he says the simplest example of it is in music theory. Now, again, he's the only one um, that I could find who discovered the secret of music. That I started out training in music in Minneapolis from a young age, and so I took adult music theory when I was like 15 or something, and I noticed this logical error. And then basically in Western music, 2/3 is not allowed as the perfect fifth. And it sounds super simple. And I was studying with a university professor at the time and taking private training, and he just said, well, it's logarithms. Western music, it's based on logarithms. But then I found a book by Sir James Jeans on the science of music, and he explains, no, actually the truth of music is this infinite spiral, and that's the actual Pythagorean tuning. And so I realized that this must be the truth of reality, but I kept it to myself because I also realized the Pythagorean theorem was actually not true, which is crazy thing to think, right? Because it's the most commonly accepted theorem of mathematics, of science. But it turns out there actually is something called the non-commutative Pythagorean theorem. And I recently I had an interesting exchange with the math professor, Luke Kaufman. He focuses on non-commutativity. And I was looking at the history of the Pythagorean theorem. And all of a sudden I emailed him. It was like a Sunday night. And I said, the Pythagorean theorem is actually non-commutative. And he said, you mean this? And he sent me an unpublished proof of the, it's been published. But at any rate, this is my point, is that I realized this secret, and then I took quantum physics my first year at college. And okay, so this is the circle of fifths. This is not accurate because the actual truth is an infinite spiral of fifths. And so the octaves don't line up. And that's the traditional Chinese tuning, is that it's the octaves don't line up. And instead you have an infinite, what Alon Khan again calls 2-3 infinity, because
because or bounce back to the exact same spot where they started, and so they continuously build up a phase indifference as these tones play back on each other that is perpetually increasing to infinity.
Well, the other.
Oh, well, I know on the guitar it's tuned to the half. So like that, if you cut the string perfectly in half, and you can rest.
This is okay right here. Okay, right here we're looking at a torus. This is an example. This is a good example of what they're trying to in non-commutativity. They use this model of the donut as it's what's called a non-commutative torus, because it's not just a donut. It's the fact that it has to twist around itself, and so you have an overlapping. And where they overlap, you inherently cannot see it. Have you ever heard of the Klein bottle?
Yeah, and this actually has the same math as the Rodin coil.
Okay, look up the Klein bottle. Just look up Klein bottles, Klein, and then bottle.
That's like a topological thing though, with no volume.
Yeah, it is. But it's also right, Jeremy. Thank you. It's two Mobius strips put together, and so the whole point is you inherently cannot see the interior unless it's invisible, right? But you can't see where they overlap because this is a 4-dimensional structure in 3-dimensional space. This is what I'm trying to get at, is that you inherently cannot see the source of sound. And see, our whole Western science is based on external measurements. And so we have to get around that concept in order to. And what I realized is that if this simple concept was true, then you could inherently resonate energy, infinitely, based on listening. And so then I discovered that I discovered that there's this training called Qigong. I don't know if have people heard of Qigong, but it means
a little bit.
Okay, so basically I saw a sign. Okay, well, first of all, let's just Jack Sarfati. Okay, I want to keep this relevant, right? He mentions this author Michael Grosso. He did a post recently there. Michael Grosso. He's written a couple books on Saint Joseph of Cupertino. Now, one of his books is called The Man Who Could Fly, and this book is the actual translation of the Italian biography of Saint Joseph. So Saint Joseph de Cupertino was the best documented person who could levitate. I mean, there was like reams and reams of documentation by people who wanted their worst to disprove that.
There's like a movie about it, right?
No, there's not a movie. Not that I know of. I mean, I don't know.
This sounds like something I should be deeply studying, because this is exactly what we've been looking into. But
it's called The Reluctant Saint, 1962. It's
is
really
this
good.
the monk who meditated for like 40 years and was able?
I don't know. There wouldn't be a photo of him. That's not the same guy. Okay,
no, it's not a photo of him. It's a movie about him.
Okay, well,
comedy.
What happened? What they did was the church kept locking them up, but see, when you're in a dark room,
his mother sent him away and didn't want him to be there.
Right, at first, a monk, and he was considered a failure by normal standards. But when they locked him in a room, that was the perfect standards for him to train, because it's based on not seeing, it's based on listening. And so I ended up finishing my master's degree training with this Chinese spiritual healer, and he works with the Mayo Clinic doctors in Minnesota. And he trained at Shaolin, first of all, but then he finished his training at Mount Qingcheng, which is a Taoist sacred mountain. And he did 28 days of full lotus yoga, meditation with no sleep for 28 days. And when he finished that, he also levitated up 9 feet. He spiraled up.
I just have to quickly interject. Notice how this monk who is levitating in this picture has the halo around his head.
Yeah, the halo I've seen. The halo is completely real. It's completely real. I'm talking from personal experience here. I can assure you that this anti-gravity force, I can feel it right now in the center of my brain. I mean, this is totally, any of us can access this just based on this simple logical secret. And what I discovered is that in Qigong, like I said, the yang is the perfect fifth, the yin is the perfect fourth. Now there's a meditation called the small universe meditation, and that's what I relied on for my training. There's a book called Taoist Yoga, Alchemy and Immortality, and it's a free book. It's all based on the secrets of the 12 musical notes around the body. So in other words, what you're doing is you're listening to this musical scale as an infinite spiral of the 12 notes, because the 12 notes are built from the perfect fifth. Like you learn that as a circle of fifths, but it's actually an infinite spiral of fifths. And so all you have to do is close your eyes, and you can, like, the practice I did was a CD that the class I took, he made a CD, and so that's what I used to practice with. And so he goes through the 12 spots along the body, and then you just listen as the sound moves to each spot. You listen to it, and then you visualize light for each spot, and then you keep rotating around. And as you do so, you're increasing the frequency of light inside your body.
Do you mind if I ask, you're correlating toroidal field with 12 points, and you're talking about the spiraling within, and also talking about the Klein bottle. If you look up the Rodden coil, isn't this the math that he based all of this off of? Because it's a 12 point, and it's toroidal, and it has like the fourth and the fifth harmonics.
Let me just finish my talk here, okay? Just let me focus on what I need to talk about. All right, I'm not done yet.
Let's get it all out, and then we'll go on to the other aspects of it.
Let's all be chill, yeah.
Okay, let me get to basic. We're talking about what's called mathematical ontology. Okay, if you look up Professor Tim Maudlin, he's on science channels. He will talk about what's called mathematical ontology. Okay, we're talking about the meaning of the difference between discrete number and continuous number. So what happened is Philolaus, and this is before Socrates, the origin of Western music theory is also the origin of the irrational number in mathematics, the square root of 2. So the major second music interval was originally 9/8, and that was cubed to be the tritone. The first approximation of the tritone was actually the square root of 2. And you can find this in Peter Pesick's book called Music in the Making of Modern Science. And he's a professor at St. John's University. Okay, so if you cube 9/8, this is Platonic philosophy, and he secretly got it from Archytas. Okay, Archytas learned it from Philolaus. Now, what Philolaus did was he flipped his lyre around, and by flipping his lyre around, he changed the root tonic. Because if you really train in music theory, it's all based on the root tonic. In other words, what's the source of the one? Because of the source of the one tells you what the octave is, what the perfect fifth is in relation to the one. It turns out that the perfect fourth can never be a natural overtone of the root tonic. That the ratio 4/3, because the 3 has a different denominator than the root tonic of the 1, because the natural overtones, they have to maintain the same root tonic. In other words, they have to be a 1 or an octave harmonic in the denominator. Okay, so if you have 4/3, the only way to get 4/3 as a perfect fourth in music tuning is to achieve it from 2/3, which is the perfect fifth, as an undertone, but you're not allowed to use 2/3 as the perfect fifth because Archytas created the first logarithmic equation in Western mathematics, which is the perfect fifth plus the perfect fourth equals the octave. Now, how many people?
How do we spell Archytas?
Archyts. Or no, TYS, sorry. Archtys. How many people have learned this in basic music theory? The perfect fifth plus the perfect fourth equals the octave. Anybody with me on that? Okay.
Yep,
Nope.
heard that here, and I have a lifetime of playing with it.
Yeah, so you can go as high tech as you want, but the thing is you have
Plastic
to really
recorders.
study the logic. You have to really study the logic of what this stuff means. Like, in other words, that was the very first logarithmic equation, but it was based on the wrong music theory. Now, from that first equation, the perfect fifth plus the perfect fourth equals the octave, that's where they got the square root of 2 originally. And if that was documented by math professor Luigi Borzicchini, and I've corresponded with him starting in 2001 after my master's degree. So, for example, the major third as 5/4 was the first approximation of the cube root of 2. And the cube root of 2 is what launched modern science, because you have three-dimensional geometry. But the thing is that it's that whole concept of irrational magnitude assumes a symmetric conversion of time into space, when in fact, time is actually asymmetric to frequency. It's inherently an eternal motion. That's what non-commutative is, because commutative means an inherent symmetry to the mathematics. So it's like, it's abstract.
There it is. That's what I wanted. That really gets right down to the core of what I wanted to understand from you.
Okay, so this is why Alon Khan calls it 2-3 infinity. Now, how many people have heard of the Pythagorean comma? Basically, what that is that you create the 12 notes of the scale from the perfect fifth, right? But what happens is as you build up the perfect fifths, when you get to 7 octaves, the 12 fifths go slightly beyond the octave. So when you divide the octaves, the perfect fifths back into the same octave scale, they don't line up with the octave for the basic reason that 3 doesn't go into 2. They'll never line up. So what everybody assumes in the West, it's like, okay, no big deal. You just slightly change the tuning, and then you get equal temper tuning, and you can have harmony, and that's much better. But guess what? You just lied. You've just lied about the truth of reality. Now, if you want to lie, fine, go ahead and lie. But you have just destroyed the foundation of reality. Now, look at every culture on the planet. Every human culture has music. They all use the octave, the perfect fifth, and the perfect fourth. And the truth of it is, if you study our original human culture in Africa that we all came from, it's still around. They have a snake statue from 70,000 years ago. It's you can look it up. It's a snake statue. It's called N/OM because they have that clicking language. It's in South Africa, and this is their energy, the nom energy. It's the same thing as chi. Every male in that culture is required to do this musical spiritual energy training. And that used to be the core focus of our whole original culture. And because of that training, all the males, the women danced, or the women sang. They sang all night long, and the males danced all night long. And by the women singing, they would send their energy into the males, because the voice actually communicates what would be called yin chi. It's a type of energy, and then the dancing is what ionizes that energy. And so essentially you're transducing again the sound into a higher frequency. And so in terms of what I did for the past 20 years is I converted that all into modern science. So essentially, like, if you look at Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, what they've discovered is that ultrasound is the quantum coherence of the microtubules in the neurons, and those are metamaterials. And the tubulin inside the microtubules resonates at the terahertz, which is the blue lights. We already have that blue light, and that's what is the quantum non-locality that Roger Penrose calls proto-consciousness. It's already in our neurons. So all we have to do is meditate, and we'll see this blue light already. And then when we see that blue light, we're absorbing virtual photons from the future. Now, according to relativistic science, virtual photons are just a mathematical abstraction.
What a bunch of BS.
What about what?
I said, what a bunch of BS coming from that. This whole idea of virtual fields and virtual particles is entirely impractical and bunk.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is there's already been experiments that have proven that they can absorb virtual photons and then turn it into increased photon energy. In other words, all virtual photons are is a time reversed negative frequency energy, and this is what Louis de Broglie first discovered when he was critiquing relativity from quantum physics, because what he discovered, he got the Nobel Prize, right? But he said himself his greatest discovery was what he called the law of phase harmony, because as a particle goes towards the speed of light, based on quantum physics, the frequency goes up because the frequency is directly proportional to the momentum. But due to relativity, the time also goes up, so the wavelength gets bigger. But all the way back to Pythagoras, based on music theory, frequency is inverse to time. Therefore, logically, for both relativity and quantum physics to be true, there has to be a time reversed negative frequency from the future that is guiding matter all the time. And he called this the law of phase harmony. And it's not taught in physics class, even though he said that's his greatest discovery. And the reason it's not taught is because it's also non-commutative, which means the only way it can exist is if there's not a symmetric rest frame in which you can measure something assuming a symmetric time invariance as a spatial measurement.
Okay.
So,
go ahead, sorry.
So in other words, this is very easy to do. Like anybody can practice this as meditation, and you can immediately increase your energy. You'll feel like if you study Wim Hof, like the Wim Hof breathing, right? That's essentially a type of way of increasing the frequency in your body. That's a foundation. That's one foundation for it. But what you're doing through meditation, you're synchronizing your visualization with your breathing. But what you're really doing is you're listening to the source of your thoughts. And the thoughts originally are actually light. It's actually biophotons internally. I mean, science has proven we actually emit biophotons. And what Roger Penrose calls it negative resonance, because what's happening is that the quantum Schumann resonance is actually the negative frequency. It's like, like the slow backwards wobble of planet Earth, it's, the planet spins, but it has a slow backwards wobble.
26,000 year cycle.
Exactly.
Right.
So
the precession is in the opposite direction of the rotation.
Exactly. That's why it's non-commutative. See, that's what makes it non-commutative. Just like 2/3 and 3/2 are non-commutative to the one.
Yeah.
In other words,
screen, I'm actually demonstrating what that phase coherence looks like on my screen right now, just using a signal generator, a scope, and the math function on that scope to show the phase coherence between those two. So we're looking at different waveforms that are superimposed on each other. One of these is coming in at exactly 1 kilohertz, and there we'll turn them both to 1 kilohertz. And now I'm going to just change this by 0.1 hertz.
Okay, you just said hertz. You said hertz. Hertz.
Well,
Hertz.
Right,
hertz.
This is
you said hertz, right?
Yes.
You're not listening to me. Hertz assumes a symmetric measurement. Hertz is symmetric frequency. Okay.
Right. Well, if I change it to square wave, we could talk cycles per second, and then we're actually,
No, seconds. Seconds assumes a symmetric geometry. The concept of seconds already is we have to go all the way back to before Plato. See,
but
that's
actually your whole basis upon all of these theories is based off the equal theorem circle.
I get what you're saying, because time.
Can I just say something here? Okay, I posted in the chat. There's a guy named Pierre Desmarais. He got a research grant at University of Arizona, He calls it 5 bits. It's the exact same concept. He's using it for room temperature, superconducting, quantum computing. It's the same exact concept. He has the non-commutative phase of the two frequencies, and he uses that to create a superposition, and he says there's no need to collapse any quantum wavelength. He can have a classical approximation using acoustic phonons, and he does use ultrasound. And so look at his research. I posted the link in the chat. You can go to the chat wherever it was and look up Pierre Deymer, Deymer. He's got
if you
all.
Put it in the private chat, I can share it on the screen.
Yeah,
too.
or you
I
can
don't
just
think
type.
anybody's disagreeing with you. I think it's just.
I'm just saying,
more
look
so
up
the
Pierre
communication on the words that
Deymer.
we're
Look up Pierre Deymer, and he's got all the graphs and all the high tech stuff you want. He's got all that stuff with the phase and the frequencies, and you can look at it, and he's got the same concept. So all you have to do is type in Pierre, and then the last name is Deymer, and you look that up, and he's got a book. He's got a book on it. He calls it 5 bits, and he says this is the secret of quantum computing. My own quantum physics professor, he uses the same non-commutative concept for the quantum teleportation NASA satellite system that he's set up. He's having it tested by NASA right now. Like China already has a quantum teleportation system, but he's saying that the non-commutative one cannot be hacked. It cannot be hacked because it's non-commutative, and he uses that same model. It's the torus. It's not just a torus though, because you have to overlap the what they call the SU2. It's a double. It's what's called a it's called a two sphere. It's like you have a block sphere, but it's actually a two sphere because in quantum physics you have a Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Non-commutativity is before the uncertainty principle. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle originates from time frequency uncertainty. Now, what's been proven is that in listening to music, we can listen up to 10 times faster than time frequency uncertainty. Okay, we can listen. Our process of quantum biology is more complex than physics. You can talk to Nobel physicist Brian Josephson about this. You know, he created the Josephson effect that you can't have MRI machines without a Josephson superconductor, Josephson junction superconductor. His whole emphasis right now is that biology is more complex. Roger Penrose says the same thing. So does the collaborator of David Bohm. Basil J. Hiley's professor says that quantum physics is not mechanics. It's actually an organic process of consciousness. It's what they call proto-consciousness. In other words, the universe is inherently alive. It has sentience at the fundamental level. That's what proto-consciousness it is. It's not thinking. It's like inherent active information from the future that's secretly guiding us all the time.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to sound like I was disagreeing with you on that. I understand what you mean with the problem of time, the problem of the SI unit second, because it does assume a symmetrical geometry, and that was a consensus by the scientific community because they kept on getting different measurements for the speed of light, and it was really screwing things up, and ultimately we needed some kind of standard. So instead of accepting that the dynamics of space and time itself are actually all based on variables that can be modified with electric, magnetic, and other types of fields, instead they just decided to pick one solid number and adjust everything to it. And so we get gauge theory and gauge factors where we just assume.
Okay, can I just say something? Okay, Alon Khan's, he makes this point in his talk on music of shapes. If you listen to that talk, he talks about the standards, and it used to be that the wavelength was the standard, but that got changed to frequency, So in other words, time and frequency are now the origin. Like time is no longer a spatial measurement. It's inherently a frequency measurement. Now, his big point is that Heisenberg discovered that the origin of the absorption spectrum is actually non-commutative frequency of light. Now, see, my whole point is like along Kant, he says the simplest example is music theory, the truth of music theory. So what I didn't finish explaining is that with the Pythagorean comma, essentially the way it's taught is that it's normally just you have the perfect fifths don't line up with the 12 perfect fifths don't line up with the 7 octaves, and so they're divided back, and then they're compromised into the equal tempered logarithms. So you get you have 12 notes times the square root of 2, 12th root of 2 for the logarithms. But his whole point is that actually the exponentials are non-commutative when you invert them. So what that means is that you have when you have the Pythagorean comma, it's 2 to the 12th. It's 3 to the 12th because it's 12 perfect fifths, and then it's 2 to the 19th because it's 7 octaves as 2, but then you're taking 3/2 of the perfect fifth and you're adding it to the octaves. So you have 12 plus 7, so it's 2 to the 19th. So you have 3 to the 12th, then you have 2 to the 19th. But when you take it as when you divide that back into the octave, because it's non-commutative, therefore you have 3 to the 1/12th and 2 to the 1/19th. I mean, you have 3 to the 1/19th and 2 to the 1/12th. You see what I'm saying? They're non-commutative because you have to invert the exponentials.
Right, exactly. Like we're just looking at a slight difference between the interaction frequency of these waves. They don't line up with each other, so they're going to continuously create a motion or a drift between them that's never going to be balanced out. It'll never be balanced.
Now, what Kans's point is that the non-commutative numbers, those discrete ratios, are actually more dense than the real number continuum. So when everybody learns, the real number continuum, which is the basis for the calculus, when you get to like Basil J. Hiley he's using non-commutativity to explain this newly discovered quantum potential force, that David Bohm discovered, which is the same thing what Louis de Broglie discovered. You have this pilot wave from the future that's guiding the matter. Okay, but what Basil J. Hiley's emphasizing is that also it's non-commutative, and so it's, let's see, what was I just saying? Essentially, it's a newly discovered force, and it was even covered up by Richard Feynman. Basil J. Hiley has a recent talk that he gave to the Pari Center. If you look up PARI and then Center, it's on YouTube, and then look up Basil J. Hiley, and he and I've been emailing. He says, well, that talk is for non-professionals. And what he does is he explains in detail why Richard Feynman is wrong. Okay, just scroll down and you'll get to his talk. Or no, you have to look it up on YouTube. If you go to the Pari Center YouTube channel, it'll be on the YouTube channel. Okay, so essentially, this is a newly discovered force. Okay, it's still not recognized by most of physics because they're still using. Oh, my point was, like, when you get to non-commutativity, the calculus has to be from the future and the past at the same time. It's what they call non-commutative calculus. So you're not using the real number continuum anymore. But that's a whole other thing, like the mathematics. Like, if you want to get into that, but yeah. This his talk? I can't. It's the screens. Yeah, that's the talk. So if you watch that whole talk, okay. So So now Jacques Sarfati, he's trying to claim that he literally was trying to claim that Saint Joseph de Cupertino was a ET alien from the future. No, you could say technically he is from the future because you have to time travel in order to have any of these abilities. It's inherently precognitive. In other words, the original source of all these other spiritual like levitation or anti-gravity originates from precognition.
Yeah. Speaking of gravity and strange phenomena, let me pull this up on screen one more time for you. So let me activate my camera. And when you found this, and I don't know how you ended up finding it in this paper, but you found this fantastic demo experiment. And boy, what a fascinating one it was. So I showed this on BurnEye's channel now, Alien Scientists. Audience gets to see it too. So it is extremely simple. I've got a line drawn on each of these magnets. And what's going to happen is right now they're attracted pole to pole, so north to south or south to north. And if I give any kind of rotation to these test tubes, we're going to that they roll up, but they always move up. Now here's the thing.
Hey, that's awesome, man.
I don't actually
nice
have
going, Jeremiah.
All I got to do is wiggle this back and forth. They don't even have to roll around in order to always move up. So I'm going to get them pretty close to the tube top so that we can actually see this a little bit better.
Hey, that's really cool. I can't believe you replicated that.
Oh, as soon as I seen that video, I'm like, I have to do this. I have to do this. So I ordered the magnets that night. And so if I place this sideways and I rotate the tubes, we're noticing that the magnets aren't rolling, the lines aren't moving, and they're staying in place. If I even give this the slightest tilt,
then they go
right back to actually try to rotate these, and I can't rotate them in opposite directions because the tubes are pulling together so tightly. I can hear the glass wanting to crack. I already busted off the bottom of one of these.
Yeah.
But
would it work? Would it work with plastic? Do they make plastic test tubes?
Perfectly fine with plastic. It works with anything. In fact, you could even use it on a flat surface with cylinder magnets. But the effectiveness and how fast the stuff, how it's always up, doesn't matter which way you flip it. Doesn't matter exactly what angle that it's at, as long as the angle is not perfectly flat. I mean, even this little angle, we can see that it's actually turning it, and this is barely tilted, so it doesn't take much. So what's happening, and I have to really study the physical geometry of the magnetic fields here and what gravity is doing to cause this phenomena. And so we're looking at two spheres, and if those points between my fingers are exactly where the poles are touching, what's happening is gravity wants to pull this down, wants to pull this down. But of course, the poles are in contact with the test tube, and the test tube has enough friction where they can't slide down. But gravity is still pulling on them, and the back of those spherical magnets are not in contact, so they're actually getting tilted at an angle like this. And so when one of those tubes move and these try to roll against each other, they're rolling on the tube at a slight angle. And if I were to take, and this is what I did to kind of demonstrate this the other day, if I take this at 90 degrees where one of these bearings can no longer rotate, I can still make this one roll, and we can see it's rotating because there is just a tiny little angle, tiniest bit of an angle. But if there's actually an angle at which if I hold these two things perfectly flat to Earth, it will not rotate, and it's very, very sensitive to which side is being pulled down in the gravitational field. So it has everything to do with the fact that one part of the magnet is being pulled down more than the other. Their interface at the surface from friction is being tilted, and that causes them to have just ever so slightly a continuous precession in one direction when they are given angular momentum. And that momentum is shifted 90 degrees, just like, when you push down on a gyroscope, the side that you push down on does not go down. It's actually a 90-degree shift around, and that's the side that goes down. Same thing here.
Yeah, what you're reminding me of is Basil J. Hiley. He in that talk I told you about, in his recent papers, he's been talking about the Coriolis effect, and he's saying that the Coriolis effect actually originates from this quantum potential, and that's like a macroscopic example
of
awesome. Of the quantum potential. Basically, the Richard Feynman diagrams that they're so famous. He says that there's actually an extra twist in those diagrams, and that's what the quantum potential is. But it, you have to put an extra twist in those diagrams in order to understand the quantum potential. So, and he's he's doing experiments right now that prove if you look up the weak measurement experiments of Yakir Aronoff, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Aronoff-Bohm effect.
Oh,
essentially,
yeah, absolutely. I understand completely why that happens, and also why they had so much confusion on getting it wrong at first. It's because the electron drift velocity through the wire produces another type of field that's not at all in the Maxwellian mathematics, and it's nowhere beside Gibbs' adaptation of those mathematics. It's been totally missing, and that's the variable gauge factor being produced by the polarization of the vacuum caused by the flow of the electrons inside the wire and the lack of flow of the protons inside the wire. So there's an extra electric field. It moves along with those charges, and because only the electrons or the negative charges are moving, it generates an actual motional wave that causes one of the two electron beams passing around. You know, the one that's actually going against the direction of the motion of flow through the solenoid coil is going to slow down slightly, and then the one that is going in the direction of the flow of those rotating electrons around the solenoid is going to speed up slightly, so they get out of phase because they're interacting with real variable refractive index modifications of the vacuum caused by the motion of charges.
okay, yeah, I'm I mean, there's continual discussion and debate about the Aronoff-Bohm effect, but I think Basil Basil Hiley, I mean, he understands it because I mean he worked closely. He co-authored books with David Bohm. He was David Bohm's collaborator. Let me get some water. But there's another thing is the neutron spin experiments. But this is what my professor, he first proposed this experiment in 1967, and essentially because the neutron doesn't have any charge or magnetic, I guess you would call it charge, right, or field, or current. I don't, but it's
Right.
it's neutral. It's and
Potential
so
balance.
so you can actually visualize the spin using the Stern Gerlach. Well, no, what they do is they split the neutron using interference. So it's entangled. It's one neutron entangled with itself. But what they proved is that the spin is inherently non-local.
I've got to look more into that.
The spin doesn't exist in space-time.
Of course, the next obvious question would be, where does it exist in, or what medium is it being transferred or carried?
See, this is Lee. Okay, Lee Small, and he took his first quantum physics class from the same professor I had, Herbert J. Bernstein at Hampshire College, and actually Jack Sarfati was at San Diego with Herbert Bernstein. Jack and I had a bunch of emails together recently when I told him about how I had been a student of Herb Bernstein. Anyway, so what was I talking about? The neutron spin. What was I talking about? At any rate,
You're talking about non-commutative or non-communicative nature of the neutron's magnetic moment, and how it can be quantum locked with itself or with its own field.
Yeah, the non-commutative spin. Oh yeah, it's what Roger Penrose calls fundamental time, and he got that phrase from Lee Smolin. Okay, Lee Smolin was a student of the same teacher I had. The thing about Herb Bernstein is he says that everybody should take quantum mechanics as their very first physics class because quantum mechanics is the foundation of science now. And see, I never took physics in high school, and so quantum physics, it was Herb Bernstein, he taught us the Dirac dance. It's called the Dirac dance, and he taught that to demonstrate quantum entanglement or non-locality. And you can see this. There's videos on it on YouTube, but essentially you just imagine you have a wine glass in your hand, and then you have to keep the glass upright, see? And then you have to spin your hand around like that and then come back up like that. Now that is non-commutativity right there. Now, what that's demonstrating is the 1/2 spin of the electron has to be a 720 degrees spin in order to be observable. In other words, as a 1/2 spin, the electron is inherently non-local at the foundation reality. But in order for science to observe the electron, it has to
assume reality.
It has to do this 720 degree spin back into itself. That's the fifth dimension that inherently cannot be seen. And so that exists everywhere. In other words, at each 0 point in space-time, there already is this spin like that. See what I just did? Like
Yep,
that,
that's taking its act right there. The physical.
And what that is time. That's actually pure time. It's the future and the past overlapping as fundamental time. You can look up that phrase fundamental time. That's what Roger Penrose uses. Alon Khan calls it primitive time, and then math professor Lou Kaufman calls it primordial time. And so, see, the whole point of Lee Smolin, he's written several books on this, is that in physics, time is assumed to be not only a external measurement, but a symmetrical spatial measurement. That's what they call time invariance.
Yeah, it cannot be. There's just no way that physics does not work if time is truly symmetrical. It only works in the very low application sense of, you can hook a battery to a coil, but you talk particle accelerator physics, and all of a sudden all these strange phenomena start coming into play. And anytime we were talking high velocity or relativistic velocity particles or field interactions that can be phase shifted or become coherent with each other, basically build up on each other, now time suddenly becomes a variable, but that makes the mathematics incredibly difficult, involves differential equations, and physicists freaking hate it. So it's been all but wiped out of our language.
And what Basil J. Hiley's big point is that when Richard Feynman introduced renormalization, what he was doing was covering up this non-commutative, non-local quantum potential force.
Absolutely.
And that's the anti-gravity force. And so if you just go to that Basil J. Hiley, that the Pierre Damer guy, he's using that to create quantum computing, superconducting room temperature quantum computing. He's using the exact same concept of non-commutative frequency as a non-local resonance for, you can study if you want all the technical stuff, but I just do it as quantum.
Practical application and real physical implementation of these concepts is really where I want to focus, because it can't literally work if physics as it stands today in the mainstream is correct. These things are impossible, but yet we can see them, observe them, use them, and we are using them right now. So obviously something's wrong, and it needs to be fixed.
That's why I study science, but like Roger Penrose's point is that calculations are not consciousness. And so, in other words, this whole fixation with artificial intelligence and that's all inherent to the mathematics ever since Plato. In fact, Luigi Borzicchini, he wrote a book called Plato's Computer, because literally from the very first origin of irrational magnitude mathematics, because of that logical error, you can predict the development of the technology. I mean, it started with catapults. I mean, it really started with chariot wheels, and then catapults, and then cannons, but essentially you can practically predict, artificial intelligence just from the wrong mathematics. It just keeps escalating through the logarithmic dimensions. And there's another term for this called the music logarithmic spiral. And this is what I just finished a book on this about a mind control scientist, Andrija Puharich. There's going to be a Netflix documentary about Andrija Puharich this spring. And they might be citing my research because I looked up in the archives. He corresponded with this professor who was working with the UN think tank that was set up with all these high-level physicists. And they were they're trying to create this applied physics model. Einstein was a big supporter of it. the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, and they're trying to create a unified field theory, but it's all based on this what they call the music logarithmic spiral. In other words, if you keep extending the logarithmic musical ratios into higher dimensions of logarithms, and that's what physics is. It's all based on symmetry. You
right.
see?
If I were to quote Tesla, and in his time, today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiment, and they wander off aimlessly into equation after equation, eventually building a structure which has no relation to reality. He's absolutely right. They've gotten so lost in the dogmatism of their own symmetrical equations that they have completely forgotten about the real physics and the fact that a physical universe exists that doesn't obey what's on their papers. And so I know it gets more complicated when we start to consider that everything in the universe, including the speed of light, is a variable, but we have to if we want to ever move forward, because we've had the same tech for like 100 years. We're not moving forward. The stuff is out there. It's being used and tested, but in extremely isolated events by universities and by accelerator labs, and it's never actually made its way into any kind of practical application. But using this tech, we can ground pump electrons, extract extra energy, convert Brownian motion directly against what Lord Kelvin said, which is it's impossible to ever utilize or rectify Brownian motion. We know that that's definitely not true. We could even access things like, large-scale Casimir effect type forces using nano rectennas. And there's just so much power, so much potential, and so much ability to manipulate the dynamics of our three-dimensional space-time by using this other field force that's totally not recognized, which is what I've been calling the T field, or the temporal field. And it's something that grows out of the interaction between two waves that aren't perfectly matched up with each other, but can still build upon each other.
Yeah, I think if you look at Pierre Damer, I mean, you'll be able to relate to his research because it's all has the same kind of oscilloscope, graphs and all that. And that's what he's doing. He's saying this is very simple. It's acoustic phonons that are superconducting at room temperature, and you can use this for quantum computing.
That's
It's all you have to. You just have to understand this concept of non-commutative phase. As soon as you understand that, then you can maintain a non-local resonance between the two frequencies. You adjust one of them and you use the other one as a reference wave. And I'm not gonna, I've quoted his work from years before, and I read it, and it was like that's the exact same concept. And he had the mathematical equation. I'm like, that's the exact same concept. But that's all I needed to know. He understands the foundation. So what he does with that's now for me, if you go back to this quote you made about Tesla and the experiment and getting the science versus the experiment, it goes all the way back to Plato, because Plato argued that the Platonic realm was based on this inherent symmetric two-ness that existed before number, and his argument was based on the human body. And he said, look, it's self-evident that our two eyes are symmetric, our two hands are symmetric, our two legs are symmetric. But if you look at Taoist alchemy, they'll say the exact opposite. They say the left eye is yin qi and yang shen, the right eye is yang qi and yin shen, and on and on. And it's all complementary opposites. Now there's a guy named Eddie Oceans, and he was a physicist at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and he coined this phrase quantum psychology, and he tried to teach it to Carl Pribram. And people have probably heard of Carl Pribram, right? The holographic brain model. He was the first, he promoted that idea, but he couldn't understand non-commutativity. And Eddie Oceans was trying to explain. Eddie Oceans realized the secret of Wing Chun and of what they call Neigong and its internal martial arts is non-commutativity. So essentially, like when you learn the Dirac dance, this essential move, it's you can look that up on YouTube, but in Tai Chi, that's called the silk reeling exercise. And essentially what it means is the outside of your hand is yang, the inside of your hand is yin, your upper body is yang, your lower body is yin. And so when you do this motion, you're putting the yang against the yin of the lower body, and then the yin of the hand against the yang of the upper body. And that's
yes. the time you've rotated your hand around and it's done a full 720 degrees, what's happened is the yang and the yin have both existed in the exact same spot at different times, but yet in the exact same space. And so that whole idea where they can't exist in the same space, not at the same time, that they do cross that same path. This is where we get that full yin yang chase loop where it never ends, and they're always trying to follow each other, but they never catch up.
And this is what scares people, because like if you really study music, you have to memorize music, right? But at some point, you have to start, when you're memorizing music, you have to really listen to the source of the music. And then you have to start wondering, well, where does the music come from? Because most people, when they learn music, they assume, it's using an external instrument. But if you look at our original human culture, they're just hand clapping and singing. They're not using any instruments. You don't, in fact, the best music is, the whole point is that it's the source of sound is actually the source of consciousness itself. And there's no beginning or end to that. It's an eternal energy motion. And that's what, it's another example of what happens in deep dreamless sleep. It's like where people ignore the fact that they still exist in deep dreamless sleep. They assume like they're just a biological machine, that turns off at night and turns on in the morning. But in fact, the real self of who a person is actually exists during deep dreamless sleep. And so instead, people identify themselves, with their thoughts, their perceptions, and they ignore the source of who they are during deep dreamless sleep. And if you really go into deep meditation, then you can start having visions that are more real than being awake. And when you have a precognitive vision, it's actually more lucid. And this has all been confirmed in quantum biology, because what they've proven is that, for example, the sense of smell is actually non-local. It's inherently non-local based on non-commutative phase. And they explain it by like Eric Clapton using a left-handed or right-handed guitar, with like Jimi Hendrix using a left-handed guitar. What you're doing is in the sense of smell is you have the same quantum frequency of a molecule. Like with orange and lemon, it's the same exact quantum frequency, but what you're doing is you're changing the phase, and it's a non-commutative phase, and then you get a different smell. But that non-commutative phase is actually non-local. And that's also how photosynthesis works. They've proven that plants, the energy of sunlight absorbed turned into electrochemical energy by plants, is inherently non-local, and it's superluminal. And so this is going on all the time, and you can actually experience that through meditation. You can experience that all your perceptions and senses originate from this ether of energy. That's energy information, and it resonates from the future. So you can constantly be having visions from the future. Like the more you go into it.
Yeah, well, it's true. Fundamentally, all things that we feel, experience, taste, touch, smell, hear, and feel, all of those things are coming through the field forces conveyed through the vacuum itself. It's not billiard balls. They're coming through the vacuum itself, which means that the medium in which everything that is matter in the three-dimensional world exists must then transfer any interaction it has with other particles that are physical matter through this other medium that has been all but erased. And that was, Einstein's big thing when he first started to work on relativity was he really hated the idea of this aether, because it meant that there was some kind of medium that had lots and lots of different properties, and that made everything real complicated. So he tried to simplify it, because, science used to have this idea of let's simplify everything down to the most basic components so that we can understand it and then go from there. But at some point, that oversimplification got stuck. And I think it's because it's gotten so complicated in our understanding of the universe and added so many details that we've kind of maxed out the human brain capacity to process more, which is now the big push for why physicists are trying to get AI to process this stuff beyond human capacity so that we can move on past it. But you know what AI is going to tell us? Everything in the universe is variable. There are no constants. There are no gauge. There is no such thing as a solid gauge factor, and zero does not frickin' exist.
Basil J. Hiley has a great quote from Einstein, and it turns out this physicist in India, B.G. Siddharth, has the same quote. And B.G. Siddharth also focuses on non-commutativity. And it turns out that Einstein, at some point, he realized that the mathematics of Heisenberg was the secret of essentially the ether. And he said that we would have to get rid of the space-time continuum as we know it. And the mathematics of Heisenberg is the non-commutative algebra. That is, and so Basil J. Hiley has that quote, and so does B.G. Siddharth. It's just like a couple sentences from Einstein, and I'm sure that they don't know each other. Maybe they do, but B.G. Siddharth, he predicted the accelerating expansion of the universe, and he should have got the Nobel Prize for that. But he said, because of racism or whatever, because he's from India. But at any rate,
His Highness Skunkworks doesn't have a name for this. Well, yeah, that's kind of half true, but they do have a department for it. Because they don't have a name for it, they call it weird science and fucking magic. And that's because the rest of the engineers have no idea how this small group of super intuitives that are also engineers can do what they can do with the stuff that they have. They're using common materials. They're using conventional application and power supplies to do things that are quite frankly freaking impossible and look so close to magic that even Skunkworks doesn't know how to classify it. But they find these people, bring them in. And I think it's pretty fascinating that they call it weird science and fucking magic because they have no idea how else to place it.
Wizards.
Yeah, I gotta plug in my computer here. So I suppose I should log off because I'm losing. Can you still see me?
Yeah, we can still see you.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. My computer's not plugged in, so I got to plug it in, or I could keep going. But yeah, I mean, Roger Penrose is. I'll just say this is my last point: is that he says that the gravitational the source of life on Earth is from negative entropy, which is also the gravitational potential of the sun, and that originates from frequency. He says that mass originates from frequency due to the De Broglie Einstein relation.
We're starting to lose you.
Now
it looks like your computer has gone.
His point is that
you got cut out. You're cutting out real because I think you're low power on your computer right now. So
his point.
Please plug in your computer and continue.
The gravitational entropy is the opposite of the entropy of matter, and so all of our technology has tried to
see. I just love how this happens. Right, he's getting right into the good stuff. Gravity is the non-communicative nature of matter, and we're talking about the details. And of course, we can't hear anything he's saying because we're getting fractions. Always like that, isn't it? Just so you know, Void, we still can't hear all of your words yet, but let's give that a test as soon as you get that thing plugged in.
Yeah, hopefully you're able to. It was extremely choppy.
All right.
There we go. See, now we can hear you perfectly.
There we go. Plugging it in.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm gonna dip out and go to bed. This was awesome, super fascinating stuff here tonight, and I'm gonna end it on my channel here.
Yeah. I'll end it on yours, and I'll keep it going on mine here, and might also end it on Certus's. But yeah, we're ending it on Alien Scientist right now, but it shall continue on Crypto Alchemist, which I'm putting in the live chat right now.
So before you dash, and let me ask you, Void, do you mind if Jeremy forwards me your email address? I want to send you some of those video clips so you can post them up on your channel for that replication of the experiment.
Oh, all right, I'm back.
Much love, Jeremy. I'm ending it on you right now.
Okay, so Void, I was asking, do you mind if Jeremy forwards me your email address so that I can send you some clips of that replication for that experiment you shared?
Yeah. I want to send that to Basil J. Hiley. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, no
Because
problem.
I want to
give you some.
Yeah, I want to see what he says that to the Coriolis effect.
No longer live on your channel, Jeremy. I replaced it with my BurnEye channel now, so live on both my channels. I think Sir is still for now. I'll check with him if he wants out. Much love and respect, Mr. Reese. We will catch you on the. And right before you go, I've been talking to the Hutchinsons. Are you okay with scheduling next weekend the next Crystal Battery build episode with the Hutchinsons? There, Jeremy. Either Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'd like to. I'll touch base with you on that, and I want to talk more with Matt here, Rife, and get more into that Rife technology stuff too. So that was awesome having him on earlier. I really wish I could.
100%. We will be doing.
Before you step away, Jeremy, just before you actually go to bed for the night, please do forward me Void's email address so that we can get in contact and I can send him that stuff. That way no one forgets.
Yeah, I'll do that now. Just so
yeah,
that
it's just
my
name.
See you both.
Matthew is still there, saying 100% Jeremy, and exactly Matthew. We'll be in touch, and we gotta schedule a few of them together. Also, a Science of Sound episode within the next 2 weeks, focused on that, and Year of the Coil focused on the agricultural experiments and side of things. And I'm sure we will have Gerald back on that too.
There's this really great you read Ptah Hotep Divine Maxims. Show that really quickly. Hold on. So like ancient times, there was this dude, Divine Ptah Hotep, supposed to live for like 100 and some odd years. And the 10 Commandments, they're based on like 42 maxims from Ptah Hotep. And they're pretty good. Prose 9.5. If you were a man of authority, be patient when you're listening to the words of a petitioner. Do not dismiss him until he has completely unburdened himself of what he had planned to say.